Hello and good afternoon. Welcome along to another Training Tuesday. Look at that, it's Tuesday already. As always, it's a live session, so anything could happen. What are we looking at today? Well, today we're talking a little bit about file management, show files, icons files, backup files. What's the difference between them all and how they're working? I am looking a little bit dark on camera today, aren't I? Anyway, never mind. We're still here, and the important thing is MagicQ. Welcome to the usual faces there. Hello, Steve. Hello, Joe. Who else have we got here? I can't read some of your names from here. Mehmet. There we go. Good to have you with us. And if you are watching this later on, thank you for watching later as well. So without further ado, we'll dive into MagicQ here. Here you can see I'm running MagicQ 1982. If you hadn't noticed, we did sneak out a little beta a couple of weeks back. We haven't caught up with the social media side of things yet, so that'll be coming this week. But the software is released, it's online, available for download, and the change notes are on the internet, so you can go ahead and you can grab that right away. So talking a bit about file management then. So fairly obvious, when I go into setup and I save a show, so I'm going to call this one here Training Tuesday, and I hit enter, it saved my show. Okay, maybe I might call one Training Tuesday before another session. I should use a different name, but I'm not. I'm going to hit yes, and it saved my show. It does give me a little pop-up here telling me where it saved that show file, telling me that it's in my support laptop, documents, MagicQ show, and it's called the show file Training Tuesday.shw. A .shw is a show file. If I was on a console, of course, I wouldn't get all of the same directory path here. It would just be stored in my show or MagicQ show Training Tuesday.show file. If I now go into a File Explorer window, and a little shortcut for you if you're on PC, rather than having to go into your documents and faff around to find the folder, we have given you a little shortcut at the top here where you can go File and you can go Open Show Folder, and it will just take you straight into that directory rather than you having to go into your documents and look for things. A much easier way of finding your show files. If I now sort by date here, you can see there is my Training Tuesday file I saved, except there's 3 files here. There's my Training Tuesday.show, there's a .xhw, and there's also now an SBK. So the show is when I saved the show file. You can see that there, reported .shw. A show file contains everything you need to set up the console. So if I was to go New Show here and erase that show, I've got no patch anymore. If I go and look at my playbacks, they're empty, and if I go to Layout 1, I've got no groups or palettes here. And of course, if I go and hit Load Show and I sort by date and I load in this Training Tuesday.show file here, it restores my show. It loads the patch, it loads the cues, it loads the palettes and the groups, etc. And it'll even bring my layouts in. Now, a show file does contain even more information. You may notice in settings in MagicQ, if I go to my setup window here and view settings, you'll notice that some settings have this little red triangle in the corner by them. If I go to things like network, for example, all the network settings have a red triangle. But if I go to some options, for example, prog, none of these have that red triangle in the lower right corner. So what does the triangle mean? Well, the triangle in the lower right corner, if I go to network here, tells me that that's a console setting. And normally when I hit a load show, it won't change those settings. So the idea being that if I'm loading a show at a console, maybe a festival somewhere, or in a music venue, or in a theatre, wherever you might be, you don't mess up these settings because in all likelihood, that's set for the venue. So maybe the IP address for the PC in the venue is 10.00.50. And another setting here, okay, maybe the ArtNet type, well, they're using strict unicast only. And maybe, what else can we look at? Maybe that they've got a ControlNet IP address set to static and they're using a different IP for ControlNet. And if we go across to some other settings, maybe they're deciding they're using audio input, and this is how they're configuring it, and they're using a gateway and a remote on my 10 scene and touch scene. Now, if I just do a normal load show, so I go load show, yes, and I pick my Training Tuesday.show file there, you'll see those settings haven't changed. So the IP is still 10.00.50. I'm on unicast only, and I've set ControlNet enabled. However, when I saved that show originally, that information was different, but it wasn't loaded by default. When you load a show, when you click at the top here and click load show, it will not load any of the red flag settings, and that includes, by the way, any of the DMX.io windows. So that's all of the fields in the DMX.io window, they're red flag settings. We just don't put the red flag in every box, but they're all red flag settings. So they aren't loaded by default, but they are in fact stored in your show file. As we always say, all the good stuff's under shift in MagicQ, so if I hold my shift button down, you'll see the load show button disappears and changes. I'm just toggling shift on my keyboard to load backup, and next to it I get a load show plus con. Con stands for console settings, and if I hit yes here and I toggle by date and I now pick my Training Tuesday file, I can choose to load in all of those other settings, the DMX settings, the network settings, multi-console, a whole lot. Basically all the different red flag settings I can choose to load when I load in my show. And you'll see the IP address is now changed back to .25. That setting's gone back to unicast, control net's now disabled, and my touch scene and 10 scene have gone back to what they were before. Audio is now disabled because when I saved the show originally, those settings were disabled. Well, that's what they were before. So normally when you do a load show, we don't load the red flag settings. Shift, load show and console allows you to load in all the red flag settings from your show, but the show does contain everything normally. Now I say everything. Why do I need these other files? So if I come back to my file manager window here, you'll now see in here I've got 3 files called Training Tuesday. The .shw was when I pressed save show. That's my show file. Okay? The other file I've got here is a .sbk file. A .sbk actually contains exactly the same information type as a show file. The SBK is the latest show backup file. So in MagicQ, by default, we take backups of your show file. Of course, if you've ever been in any of our full training courses, we'll always tell you, please don't just rely on an auto backup. Do save the show. Don't be complacent and just say, well, MagicQ saves great backups, I never need to save my show. That's not good practice. In fact, if it were me, I'd also be backing that up onto a USB drive or an external bit of media, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know that hard drive decides to stop working on your laptop, or someone spills a drink on your console type thing. Always back it up externally as well. But backups are enabled by default. I can show you that by going to Setup, View Settings and Mode here. And you can see Auto Backup, the default is on changes, and Keep a Backup Archive is set to yes. Those are always on by default unless you decide to set that to no. Again, if you do that, you're on your own there. We do recommend in large shows where you're just doing playback, no more programming, you may want to disable auto backups, but to be honest, these days the backups happen in the background. You don't even notice them happening. They don't tend to slow the system down or make any change at all to life there. So I would leave that on. But the only thing with a backup is that we take that on changes, and it's not on every single change. It's every so often, every 15 minutes or so normally. So I could hit Save Show, and I could call this one Training Tuesday V1. Enter there, and you'll notice at the moment there isn't yet a Training Tuesday. If I sort by date here, there's not an SBK file. There hasn't been a backup happen yet. So I have to wait until that backup next happens, which could be a couple of minutes time. Okay, if I make a change, maybe that would force it. But again, don't rely on a backup. So if I was to wait for that backup to appear and take it, and then in the meantime I save the show again, I could be missing data. It could be that the backup happened before my last save, because of course I might keep the show name the same. I might just hit Save Show and enter and overwrite. I might not give it a new name. So be careful. There you go. I think it's just done its backup there. There we go. We've got an SBK in there now. We've got the show backup has happened automatically in the background. In fact, in my case now, the backup is now newer than the show file. But still, the show file is when you save a show, the SBK is the auto backup. You get the idea there. You'll notice the file size is exactly the same. Well, a backup file can be loaded just like a show and contains the same information. So if I was to go load show here, and yes, and sort by date, you can see an SBK and you can load it just like a show file. In fact, the structure is identical. So if you really wanted to, and you're confident of the file you've got here, I could even change the file extension. So I'm going to call this Training Tuesday V2, and I'm going to change that SBK to a .shw. And it will give me a warning because Windows doesn't know what an SBK or a .shw is. And I'm going to change that to an SHW. And I can now go load show, sort by date, and you can see it'll load it like a show. It's exactly the same data in those files. The only difference is we call one a .sbk and one an SHW, but you're free to change the file extension. I wouldn't recommend doing it too much, but you're welcome to do that. You can change the name of them outside of MagicQ, and as I've just shown you there, you can call an SBK a .shw and it will load. Okay? The same data is within those. So you've got SHWs, you've got SBKs. Actually, SBKs, we do keep an archive. If I sort by date here, you can see that, well, in fact, I renamed my SBK, it was there, but if I go further down this, trainingtuesday.show.sbk, there's only one SBK per each show showing here. However, we do keep a whole archive of backups. So if I jump back into MagicQ and I hold my Shift key down, you'll notice that the Load Show button turns into Load Backup. And when I click that, and yes, it's not taking me into the show folder. It's not showing me the latest backup. It's actually taking into my backup archive, which if I come into File Manager, is sitting in MagicQ rather than the show folder. It's sitting in this backup archive. And here is a whole bunch of SBK files, which are historic backups of various shows. Now they're sorted by time. So if I sort by date here, you can see since my system has been on today, and the clock is right on the system, there's been a whole bunch of different backups happened at different times and previously used backups here. Now if I'm in MagicQ and I'm looking at this on a console, it's not particularly easy to look at, so I always advise people in MagicQ on the console, toggle to advanced view, sort by date. Now I can see the information in the sensible places, so I can see my backup archive, I can see the backups as they've happened. These are full files still. These are just the historic backups. So rather than just being the last backup is what you see in your show folder, we can go back in time. Okay, I can go back to the 7th of April at 1529 and I can load the backup in from that time. This is great if you've got a show installed in a venue, someone comes and makes a change and you don't realise for a week. Well, of course, the latest backup isn't going to do it for you. You can now go back into your backup archive and you can find the backup to go back to here. Now, there are some rules of backups and backup archives. Obviously, what we don't want to do is fill up your show folder full of, or your hard disk on your PC full of SBK files. So we do periodically flush these files. Typically, normally we keep 24 hours of every 15 minutes of backups. Past that, we go to keeping daily backups for 7 days. Past that, it's weekly backups for 4 weeks, and then we go into monthly backups. So I will always have something to go back to. But I wouldn't be able to say go back to 3 weeks ago at this particular time. It's just the backup from 3 weeks ago. So it will get you there. So be aware of that. The backup archive is separate to the show folder, as you can see here. It sits in the MagicQ folder. If I was on a MagicQ console, I would go to File Manager and I can hit Up Folder and I can get into the backup archive from here. But of course, you can just do a Shift Load Backup as well. Okay, so there's a third type of file. So if I come back to my show folder here, if I sort by date in here, you can see there's also this .xhw file. And typically this is a slightly larger file. Now beware, an XHW holds no information about the show. It does not hold the patch, it does not hold the cues. If you go copying this file and try and load it on its own, you will get absolutely nothing. Okay? An XHW file is your icons file. It contains all of the icons and media for your show. It contains audio files if you're using the timeline. They are not contained in the show file by default for good reason. You know, we don't need you to transfer some of that data or load that data from a show file. If it's on the console, the data's on the console, but it's a way of you being able to transfer the media. So be aware of that. If I'm using something like the audio timeline, so if I create a bunch of cues here, and I set that into cue timing, and I set my halt to time code, and in the options, I drop an audio file onto this. So I grab this audio file here and open the timeline editor. You'll see it render off the waveform in a moment. There you go. So I've got my nice visual waveform. If I was to save the show, so I'm going to save show, training, if I can spell, Tuesday V3. I save that show file and I go into my show folder, sort by date. You'll see there's a show and an XHW. The XHW is a much larger file now. It's 8 odd meg because it's now got the audio file in. So the audio and icons, basically the media stuff, are stored separately to the show file. If you would like those to load with your show file, you need to take both files. So if I was trying to load this onto another console, I need to remember to take both the show and the XHW file. Now you might ask, how on earth do you load an XHW file? Well, MagicQ is fairly clever with that actually. If in your folder where the show file is, the XHW file exists there, it will just load it automatically. So if I'm to go new show here, and you can clearly see I've got nothing on my playbacks, and I hit load show, and I go and select my Training Tuesday v3 file, you can see it's automatically, if I go to options there, it's loaded the audio. It's loaded that XHW file just because it was in the same folder. Now, if you're using things like backing up to a USB drive, here's one I prepped earlier. So I've got a ChamSys USB drive here. I'm going to connect this up to my laptop here. And of course, being Windows, it's assigning a drive letter, which is letter D. Now, it's open up there, close it off. If I want to save to a USB drive, normally on PC, you need to set the drive letter. So I go File Manager, and I go Set USB Drive and call it Drive D, done. Now, if I want to back up my show to a USB on a console, I don't need to do that. If you're using a Mac, be aware you obviously don't have drive letters on a Mac. You want to back up to USB, you go to File Manager here, you hit Set USB Drive. I went to Net Manager, and I go to File Manager, you hit Set USB Drive, and you do /volumes. By selecting that, you can then go and pick your USB drive. So you are able to use the auto backup to USB. On Mac, you just need to type /volumes in setting USB drive here. So once you've done that, I can now hit back up to USB. I can hit enter and it will keep the same show name. And in doing so, it will save off to my USB drive both the SHW, if I go here, here you go, you can see XHW and SHW have both been saved off here to the USB drive in one go. I haven't had to go and manually go and save those two files separately. So by doing a show backup, it will back up both files to the USB drive. And of course, if I go and load that now onto a console, and I just load the show, because the XHW is in that folder, it would suck that in and load it at the same time. So just be aware of that. There are 3 different file types. .shw when you save a show, .spk our auto backup, .xhw the icons file. So hopefully that explains that for you. You guys have been extremely quiet on the chat today. Either you're bored to tears of show files, or it's been so well explained you have no questions. But anyway, as always, we do monitor the chat, so if you are watching this later on, please do feel free to drop comments, questions, etc. in the chat. If not, that's been Training Tuesday for today, and we'll see you again next week.